Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Changing an Industry, the Power of Market Research. I'm pleased to introduce you to our webinar speaker today, Mr. Kim Blickenstaff, a 1972 alumnus of Illinois Central College. Kim is currently Tandem's President and Chief Executive Officer. He joined Tandem in August of 2007, bringing more than 30 years of healthcare experience in finance, marketing, management, sales, and strategic planning. Prior to joining Tandem, he was Chairman, Chief Executive Officer, and co-founder of BioSite Incorporated, a medical diagnostic company that was acquired by Inverness Medical Innovations for $1.8 billion in June 2007. Kim has been active in the medical device and diagnostics industry over the last 12 years, serving on the board of directors for innovative, young healthcare companies. He holds a Master's of Business Administration from Loyola University, Chicago's Graduate School of Business. Kim has spoken to some of our business classes a few years ago, and we welcome him back today to speak to our current students and alumni in this webinar format. We have students here face-to-face, but we also have students and alumni online as well, so we welcome all the participants. For the online webinar participants, there is a chat box that you can use to submit questions to Kim. And for those of you in the room, when Kim is finished with this presentation, you're invited to come up to the microphone and ask your questions. And Kim has agreed to stay a little longer if we have questions after the 1:30 time period. So with that, welcome, Kim.
Thank you very much. I hope this webinar works out. Technically, I think we had a pretty good job in our practice session. Isn't that right? Good. Well, we're hoping everything's going to work here, so we live here. I got asked to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, and so what I'm going to try to do is talk to you a little bit about what I've done here at Tandem in the last 5 to 6 years, because it's really been sort of a journey in entrepreneurship, especially for me. We're going to be talking about type 1 diabetes and the insulin pump space, and frankly, when I came to the company, I had no experience in this particular disease state. And so one of the things I've always used throughout my career in entrepreneurship is using market research really to define what customers think, what the state of the industry is, and whether there is an opportunity for technology that perhaps will change an industry. So I used market research from the very beginning here at Tandem. When I joined in August, first thing I did was in September I hired Eric Verhoff, who is just a magician of market research. He's got his graduate degree from Duke, his MBA, and specifically it was in healthcare. And he's got a long experience with pharmaceutical companies and as an industry analyst in healthcare. So I'm going to talk to you about market research and really talk to you about the T-Slim pump that you see here on this front page and how it came to be and how it's going to come to change the industry that we are competing in. One of the things that you really need to understand is that it takes us about 3 to 5 years to develop a medical device from scratch. And that includes from concept phase on through the FDA. So you have 3 to 5 years in which you're not actually selling your product and marketing it. And so you really need to know what your endpoint is going to be. How well are you going to do in your marketplace? Who is your customer? Do you have a winning product that you're working on? Are you maintaining your product specifications and not drifting throughout the design process? And finally, are customers going to switch, because you're generally entering a market where there is an entrenched competitor who has failed to innovate, and you need to know whether your customers are going to switch, and will you expand the market. And all this comes to building a business model that makes the investment case for the investors to want to invest in your business. So I have found that market research is absolutely vital and critical. What we're trying to do is develop killer products, because killer products create killer companies. And without market research, you're guessing, and you really don't know how your future customers are going to react to your product. The other thing that's important about market research is that it's used not just at the beginning, but throughout the entire process. And I'll show you some quantitative data later on T-Slim. I've tested it in about 4 various phases of its life cycle, all the way out into actual beta testing with customers about a year ago as we were launching it. And we can quantitatively measure whether we're getting better or getting worse because our product design is getting better or our product design is drifting from the specs. So we use this a lot like polling would be the best description I would use for an election to find out which way the consumers of your product are going to vote. So I want to give you a little bit of a background so you at least understand why T-Slim is so revolutionary. But type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, and your pancreas stops producing insulin, and insulin is vital for storing glucose in the cells. So without it, you starve to death. And there's basically 2 ways you can get it. One is to do multiple daily injections where you measure out a bolus at a mealtime, and you inject that insulin, those units of insulin, before you eat that meal. So that we call that MDI for multiple daily injection. And then there are insulin pumps, which are continuous. These are programmable, and they can give you both that bolus insulin at mealtime and also basal insulin between meals. And in the 1980s and 90s, when they were first developed and brought to market by MiniMed, they were hailed as the artificial pancreas because they behaved much more like a pancreas and gave continuous insulin, and you got far better long-term lower complications, such as blindness and neuropathy in your fingers, which lead to amputations. So this is the 2 ways you can treat type 1 diabetes and replace your insulin. And one of the things that you need to know is that it's just better therapy to be on a pump. And this is a chart of what your insulin levels do in a normal person like you or I in response to our meals and the release of glucose as the basic food building block. And you can see you get spikes at breakfast, lunch, and dinner of insulin. And then you can see that between meals, there's always some circulating glucose where you need insulin between meals, and especially at bedtime, to get that out of the bloodstream and get it into the cells where it's finally needed as nourishment. So pump therapy in clinical trials and so forth is shown to be the best therapy, and you can live an essentially normal life if you can learn how to use a pump. And I think one of the things that we were most shocked about as I started in on this at Tandem was to find out that only about 27% of all the type 1s out there use a pump, and the rest use multiple daily injections. And so the standard of care has been that way since 1922, since insulin was discovered. And that really puzzled me because, obviously this is better therapy. It would seem to me if I were a type 1, I would go immediately on a pump. And so through market research, we really sought to begin to understand what was wrong with this picture, why so few people could use an obviously better therapy or chose not to use it. And we found out it was a multiple layering of those issues, both emotional reactions and then the frustration. And I'll go through that in a lot more detail. So just to give you background, MiniMed, the pioneer of insulin pumps, did this back in the 1980s. They miniaturized basically a huge backpack hospital pump down to a small ambulatory wearable pump in order to give that basal and bolus insulin. And believe me, this was a miracle of the 80s because, as you can see in the picture on the left, an infusion pump in a hospital is something that you'd have to wear in your backpack, and obviously nobody would shoot. But by being able to miniaturize that technology down into a small wearable pump that you could wear on your belt, it was truly opening the door to more normal life for those who wanted to go on to pump therapy. And you can see the company's name was MiniMed, which meant the miniaturization of medicine administration. And again, they were the leaders. They got it through the FDA, and they continue to be the market leader today with nearly 80% market share. They are the #1 product out there in the marketplace. The thing you need to think about, though, is that pump was designed back in the 1980s when the cell phone looked like this, and many of you probably haven't seen the first Motorola generation of cell phone, but believe me, I had one. It was the size of a walkie-talkie with an antenna. And so relative to that most widely used consumer device, the mini-med pump was very small and compact, and it was slick in design, given the environment in which it was designed in. And what we I need to go back one. What we have seen is that this is a series of their evolution of their design of their pumps, and you can see from that early 1999 pump, it really hasn't changed in any great way. It still has the same toggle button inputs. It still has this very, very poor grainy LCD screen that doesn't have a lot of room to put information on. The contrast is not very good. In fact, you rarely see these kinds of displays on the devices anymore, but that was the display of the day and on many cell phones of its time. But you can see that design that began back in the 80s and 90s is basically unchanged today. And people who I've shown the mini-med pump to, and they say, how old is that? And I have to say, well, it's actually brand new, but the design is probably about 20 years old. And this is one of the major issues that we found, is that if consumers have seen their cell phones march through a rapid evolution from those walkie-talkie versions back in the 80s, quickly through the days of, some of the BlackBerry phones to the Motorola Razr, and finally into the days of the Droids and the iPhones with touchscreens. So all that's happened while the mini-med pump had remained relatively unchanged in the course of its life. And what's really interesting is that it was actually designed, if you go online and look under Wikipedia, it was actually designed back in 1996 to resemble a beeper or a pager. And so that was the consumer device of its day, and I think you all know the pager is long gone. But it was a miracle of communication back in its day, because at least you could sort of text somebody to call you. But the way you have to operate it, you can see these toggle buttons were the same. The screen is the same screen that got incorporated into the mini-med pump, and they sort of made it look like that device of its day, which obviously is very dated given what's happened in the consumer world of consumer handheld devices that we all have, and we all are comparing new devices to. So this is the movie portion. I think you're going to control the movie and play this movie. What we want to do here is show you how you actually operate the mini-med pump. Can you open up the movie for me, operator? So this is at mealtime bolus, so we select bolus, and we want to enter our blood glucose value, because if it's high, the dose gets adjusted to account for that. So you can see you got to toggle up, and blood glucose is always a 3-digit number, so you've got to toggle up 60 to 70 times. It's the same for food. We have to enter the amount of food we're eating. You always eat about 58 to 100 carbs, units of carbs in a meal. Now you want to give some now and some later, because it takes a while, about 3 hours, to digest a meal. So they're toggling to 25% of that dose now, 75% later. And now we got to toggle in the time period that we want that later portion to be distributed over. So you can see, to do something that you're doing 3 to 4 times a day versus using an insulin pen or a syringe, that's a lot of work, and it's very hard to remember how to use that interface, because it's frankly not intuitive. It was developed back in the days before we had iPhones, and we knew what intuitive was. So do I need to advance them here? Go back to slides. Great. We're figuring this out. So what we found when we did market research, there are 3 emotions that people have to that mini-med pump and the way it works. And remember, these are people that are using Apple iPhones and are using Droids. And the first emotion is fear. Fear of not understanding the entire user interface, and there's 300 units of insulin on board, and the fear that you don't know what you might do to hurt yourself. And you feel out of control, because when you fill a needle, 20 units of insulin, you can see it, you can feel it, you know what you're doing. But when you go into one of these pumps and try to operate it, there's that just nagging to do something wrong. The second thing is the embarrassment factor, the fact that this device obviously looks like it was developed back in the 1990s when pagers were around. And when you use insulin, it's generally in a social setting like mealtime. And so to 3 to 4 times a day to have your friends asking you, what is that thing, and what is that, a medical device, and what's wrong with you, we found out that these pumps impart stigma to people because they look so much like they belong in a hospital, which is really what MiniMed did, was to miniaturize a hospital device. And then finally, the frustration. You saw those extra steps that you have to take on. And again, you need to remember that people are adjusting their basal insulin several times a day, and they're adjusting their bolus insulin for mealtime several times a day. So you're going to add about 6 or 7 different episodes of frustration into your life if you choose to go on to an insulin pump and get better therapy. So what we quickly realized here is that this is not a medical market where people were sort of immune to design. We found out this was very much a consumer market where people were very attuned to design and ease of use. And again, the person with diabetes is the person that makes the choice whether they're going to go onto a pump, even if their doctor and nurse are recommending that they do because they need to get better control. You as a patient can just say, no, I don't want to wear that contraption around to have anything to do with it, and stay with your needles or your pens. So this was a huge learning for us through our market research. You know, we started out with our market research talking to doctors. We talked to them, their nurses, and then we talked to the actual patients. And we found out physicians had really with the choice of which pump you use, just that you need to be on pump therapy. And we found out it was really the educator and the person with diabetes who really make the choice of which pump you go on and if you go on a pump. So we focused our market research highly on these two population because they truly would be the consumer for the T-Slim when we would bring it out about 4 to 6 years later. So this is just a quick background on what market research is and how you do it. There's 3 basic techniques. There's obviously one-on-one interviews where you get target patients into an office setting, and you go through a questionnaire and you can probe a lot of different things. Like we did a lot of probing of concept models. So we make up prototypes and we would probe form factor concepts. So one-on-one interview is one way to do it. Focus groups is sort of another way to do it, where you can get 8 to 10 people in a room, and it becomes a little bit more creative because you get a lot of back and forth and give and take and ideas you hadn't thought of. In fact, the making our pump thin, as I'll talk about later, came from a man that owned a razor phone and pulled out his razor phone. He said, make it like this. So it's a very creative, interactive kind of market research setting. And then finally, the online survey is probably the best way to get quantitative intent to purchase that actually helps us forecast and build a revenue model and a business model of how much market share we can capture, and is much more quantitative about how large our potential customer base is going to be and what kind of market share we can gain. So that's the 3 basic techniques that we use, and we were up to now about 5,000 interviews, and we have done this longitudinally. As I said, we started out at the beginning. We've done it all the way through the design process to the final product. And the findings were very, very important for the design of the T-Slim. As I mentioned, the first basic finding was make it slim. We found out that these pumps have a thick profile to them, and when you put them on your belt and you put that in a clip, you then end up with a stacked up device that is protruding from the patient's body and getting caught on doors and getting knocked off on getting in and out of cars. And again, the fellow who brought this up had gotten a razor phone and said it totally changed the way that he wore his phone. He's no longer wearing it on a clip, but he's throwing it in his pocket because of the slim profile. And he could wear it in his pocket, nobody even knew it was there. So he got rid of this bulky carrier contraption that he had on his belt. So the engineers basically got out the calipers, and we measured it. It was 2 inches by 3 inches by a ½ inch thick. And so we quickly made up some non-working models, took that back out and tested that form factor, and started finding out it was one of the single biggest unmet needs in terms of the pump market, was to get it modern and get it slim like consumer devices of the day. The other big learning came in the 2008 period, and you need to remember the iPhone was coming into the market about this time frame. I think it came out in 2007, 2008, and we began to run into iPhone users who were now asking us to make the device really cool looking, to make it non-medical looking, which included, you know, the fit and finish of the case it was in. We were going to go with a touch screen at that time. That was a concept that we were testing, how to make that touch screen look, the icons to put on it, make them non-medical, give it a non-medical name. Don't call it the Mini-Med or some name like that. But so we focused on T-Slim, sort of like the iPhone, using the T from Tandem as our sort of our moniker to describe the T-Slim. And then finally in 2009, we really began to dive into this whole intuitive interface issue, which was one of the most revolutionary parts of the iPhone, was that you didn't need a manual in order to use it. When you pull out your iPhone, you got that little, you know, get started guide, but otherwise it was so intuitive in terms of its sort of hub and spoke design of getting from your home page into your various functions like setting and so forth. And once you had done one function like set up your Wi-Fi, it basically taught you how to do every other setting and every other function within it. So we very much adopted that design philosophy, primarily because we were now testing type 1 diabetics who were from Mini-Med, who now had iPhones, who wanted us to make an interface that operated like an iPhone. So that became the focus from 2009 on through 2012, when we finally got the product approved by the FDA. So that's the evolution of what market research told us, and I'm going to show you a video in a little bit, but the totality of the features that went into T-Slim really were brought to us by our competitors' customers who were frustrated with the lack of these features in a device that they were using from Mini-Med that they know was designed back in 2000, 1989, something like that. So that's the story of the design process. And here's one example of a design concept that we tested. On the right was an early prototype for the T-Slim. You can see it has a chrome case. It met that form factor of 2 inches by 3 inches by ½ inch. And when you put it up with next to one of the most popular pumps out there, this was from Smith's Medical, you can see how much smaller we are, how much thinner we are, and how the form factor now is looking like an iPhone rather than a medical device. Now, market research is very important to help really test some of the feature trade-offs that you have to make in the course of developing a product. And one of the biggest feature trade-offs that we had was the power source. In traditional pumps, they don't need much power, so they throw a couple of AA batteries in there, and they don't need a rechargeable battery like we do because they don't have a touch screen that is really draining a tremendous amount of the power. Probably 70% of the power consumption that we have is for running the touch screen and not for running the motor that actually pumps the insulin. So hence we were thrown into the dilemma of the paradigm was AA batteries for everybody else, and was going to be a USB port with a USB power cord. And again, we were seeing the world change to the phone model, but the insulin pump market was frozen in this, the feeling that you could get batteries anytime you needed them day or night. So this would be a huge change, and it may really hurt the product design. So we did a lot of one-on-one testing of the power source. I'm going to show you this next video. This participant is actually a certified diabetes educator, and she trains others. Her son is a type 1, and she was a type 1. And so we were asking her about a lot of other features. We have 300 units of insulin like the competition, so we talked about that, talk about the case a little bit, but the real question we were getting at was this USB powering question that we finally needed in order to power our touchscreen. So you'll see the kind of response that we started to get from people who were now using phones that powered up in this way and could relate that over into the insulin pump market.
It's not like this, so it's going to be more a traditional pump.
Okay.
But let me show it to you now. It's called the T-Slim. The T's for Tandem. That's actually the pump itself.
Wow, look at that screen.
Yeah, and unfortunately it's not working. This is still a prototype, but it is a full-color touchscreen
You have got to be kidding me.
Similar to the Apple iPhone.
Oh, I need to call my son.
See an iPhone user?
He has an iPhone. But just touchscreen. He bought me a new phone for Christmas. All touchscreen. He said, "Mama, you gotta come up to the time." So
it's really incredible. So it's
this is wild. When is this coming out?
And this year is all I can say.
Man.
So it could be next week. It could be by New Year. But there's other really nice things about it too. First of all, it's based off the Apple iPhone, so it's almost impossible to inadvertently push the wrong buttons. It's got that full color touchscreen. What I can say but can't show is where we spend the majority of our time is in the software development. So anything that you can do with your current pump, you can do on here as well, and usually a lot easier.
This won't work.
If the buttons aren't working right now, so that's just for display.
Okay.
Unfortunately. It's got all the wizards, all the customizable settings, alerts and alarms you have in your current
You can
pump.
put your ICRs in here and everything?
Yes.
Okay, good.
It's got a 300 unit disposable versus the 200 for the other ones that we're talking about. So it's a larger disposable.
Man, it says there's no insulin. See, that's what I like.
Yeah.
I love it.
You can use any type of lure lock infusion set.
Really?
Yep, any type.
Shut up.
Metal housing, so much more durable. Now, here's a feature that's probably not readily apparent. Where's the battery?
I see battery life, but I don't.
Yeah, so where do you replace the battery?
If you tell me I charge this pump like I charge my cell phone, shut up!
What do you think I was just doing?
This is wild!
So it's an internal rechargeable battery that lasts for the life of the pump.
This is wild.
So we're excited. So,
You should be.
So a full charge will last for 10 days.
Oh my God.
So it's a 10-day recharge. It only takes an hour to fully recharge it. And we tried to think about, okay, where do you spend the vast majority of your time during the day? Obviously home, work or school, traveling, or in sometimes the case of an emergency. So we developed 4 different ways to recharge it. So right now I was recharging it to my computer, which is nice because you can actually wear your pump while you're recharging it. So let's say you're on the computer at night at Facebook and you just stick that in and recharge while you're wearing it.
Oh man, I wish I could see all these screens.
I know. Well, we're going to have another focus group when we have the software fully developed. And we're definitely
You gotta bring me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, before I forget, did I get your email just so I have that for the future groups? I didn't. What's the best email address?
SHENEKQUAL
Okay.
@yahoo.com.
You'll definitely be coming back to another group.
This is what, man, when the kids at camp see this.
Well, it's funny you bring that up too. So you have the computer charger, you have a regular wall charger.
So I think you get the drift that through these qualitative sessions you can definitely focus in on the incremental features that you have the most question about, whether they are going to detract from the design. And you can see that she loved the concept of USB powering up because that's the way the phones are now being powered up, so it makes total sense. We use the same chargers as regular cell phones, so those of you that have them in your cars, hooked to your computers, those are all opportunities to charge up your pump. It lasts 7 days. And so suddenly this power issue, which we vitally needed to power up that touch screen, which was our major advantage, was no longer a barrier in our mind, but actually it was an advantage because the world behind us, the whole world of consumer devices and cell phones were changing rapidly as we were doing the development on T-Slim. Now this is another interaction. That lady, who I think was from Michigan, this fellow was from San Francisco. But again, we were looking at the touchscreen. We were testing an early version of it and trying to see whether in large numbers people were resistant to touchscreens, because at the time, I think only about 10% of the patients that we were talking to were iPhone users. And so actually what we found as we did this market research and we started going from places like St. Louis to Chicago to San Francisco, as we got close to the tech centers of the country, we were finding a much higher percentage of the majority of people using touchscreens. So the touchscreen went from being a possible liability to a real advantage during that period of time, especially when the droids came out, and it really expanded the uptake of uses with devices with touchscreens. So here's an interview with a fellow who's a saxophone, famous saxophone jazz artist up in the San Francisco area, who turns out to be pretty technology forward in that he had been both an iPhone and a Droid user, and gave us a pretty representative reaction to the concept of a touchscreen on an insulin pump. So if you can roll that movie for us now, we will see one more reaction.
Batteries and having to buy batteries a lot, and so you don't have to worry about that. The power source is always here. The second reason is, 3 years ago, I don't think people would have said this, but now they're used to cell phones. They're used to kind of the rechargeable concept. And we wanted this to be more like a consumer device, more like a cell phone, rather than kind of an old mini-med, pump. The biggest reason to have the rechargeable is actually to power up a color touchscreen. This would be the first touchscreen on the market. It's the exact same technology that the Apple iPhone uses.
A touchscreen?
Yeah. And so you can hit that BG there, and you can see the screen that pops up where you can do direct entry of your blood glucose values.
Game over.
Is that something you like?
You win. You win.
Do you use touchscreens?
All the time. I got an Android. I got a Droid. I came from an iPhone to a Droid.
You're an early adopter, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So.
Oh, game over.
You can see the emotion that the consumers in this segment have, because you have to have the perspective that they live with their device 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's a health machine for them. And actually, they love their therapy. Actually hated the device, the Mega device that they were using. And so what we found in this market research, they love the entirety of all the features that our consumers that we talked to advised us to put into the next generation. So this was really sort of a blank slate development process here. We just had a blank piece of paper, and everything we heard in this market research we packed into T-Slim. So what I want to do is play you a little video. It's only going to take about 2 minutes, but this is our marketing positioning for T-Slim, which is touch simplicity, which refers to the first intuitive design and also the first touch screen. And you'll see that if you could see all the brochures and materials for our competitors, they're always very medically oriented. And this is really sort of cool, slick device oriented, much like the iPhone strategy. So the materials, we have embossed materials where the pump is actually displayed real size, embossed versions of it. It's just very, very slick and cool. So let me just play you this little marketing video that we use. We use this at a trade show to really do the introductory to all the features of the T-Slim that were built into it.
The T-Slim insulin delivery system embodies both the design and features that people with diabetes and their healthcare providers have asked for in a next-generation insulin pump. In a world of smartphones and tablets, we all expect the highest quality design, user interface, and materials that make us feel good about the devices we use. Outer beauty is important, and T-Slim has it. T-Slim sports the slimmest, most compact design so that it can be slipped into a pocket or worn discreetly under clothing. T-Slim wears its finish well. Glass, chrome, and a glossy exterior all make the T-Slim shine among today's most popular handheld devices. Shatter-resistant glass and a light aluminum case also make it remarkably durable. But T-Slim is more than just a pretty face. It's the first insulin delivery system cleared by the FDA that incorporates a touchscreen interface. Menu-driven controls make T-Slim extremely easy to learn and to use. The touchscreen has high-contrast lighting and colors that make it easily readable in daylight and at night. With a size that can't be duplicated using conventional syringe pump technology, the T-Slim's sleek form factor is enabled by Tandem's micro-delivery technology. This proprietary technology not only offers aesthetic benefits, but is designed with safety in mind. The T-Slim isolates the person from the device's 300-unit insulin reservoir by drawing and delivering small amounts of insulin rather than compressing the reservoir's full volume, as in conventional syringe pumps. Sensors within the T-Slim detect the amount of insulin remaining within the reservoir, which is displayed on the device's home screen. They also help detect occlusions and automatically detect and correct for pressure changes, a condition that, unknowing to the user, can cause unintended delivery of insulin in conventional syringe pumps. T-Slim is also the first insulin pump to incorporate a micro USB port, which is used to recharge a lithium polymer battery. Charging is quick, and a charge typically lasts for up to 7 days. The micro USB port is also used to transfer data to T-Connect. our web-based Mac and PC-compatible therapy management software. T-Connect's secure system quickly uploads all the pump and BG meter data to the cloud, where it can be accessed on demand by the user, a caregiver, or healthcare professional. The consolidated information is clearly displayed on an easy-to-interpret dashboard that summarizes the user's information. It empowers the individual to manage their therapy and enables healthcare professionals to advise their patients on how to improve glucose control. T-Slim, the ultimate in design and functionality for next-generation insulin delivery.
So that gives you an idea of all the features that are built into the T-Slim and how we position it. And really there's something for everybody within the design, because we talk to every age group. I mean, one of the things you think about when you do market research is demographics, young, old, male, female, technology savvy, those that are late technology adopters. And what we found is across that this is our longitudinal quantitative intent to purchase scores. And what this is after a patient or the consumer is presented with T-Slim, and remember 70–80% of Medtronic mini-med users, we ask them what their likelihood to purchase is, and we give them 5 different buckets, and on the extremes of definitely going to buy and definitely not going to buy, and then in the middle is very likely to, very unlikely to, and then on the fence. And so you take the top 2 boxes, we call it, the very highly likely and the very likely, and you add them together, and that's your intent to purchase score. And if you have a number that's below 50%, you probably have a product that is not going to do real well in the market. So in the early prototype concepts phase, we were already breaking that magic 50% intent to purchase score. As we did some of the user interface testing, I think the fellow that was reacting to the user interface, that group of people got about a 70% intent to purchase, but we didn't have the final design of the entire software suite. And after we got out into testing with the final product, and then finally we did clinical studies where people wore it for 30 days, took it home and actually used it for 30 days, we got 90% intent to purchase score, which are the highest market research intent to purchase scores I've seen in my career of any product that I've ever been involved with. And I've been involved with products that have been extremely successful, but they were all hovering down in that 70–72% intent to purchase score. So we really, really did get it right. We listened to the consumer. We got everything into the product that they wanted. That's diligent research. The things that we're seeing is that we knew that all age groups really liked the concept, but we weren't sure that was going to play out in real life. And this is the number of pumps that we have placed so far today, which I think adds up to about 4,000 pumps. And we broke it out by age group, and we were told time and time again by investors that this was a product for the young. And we try to explain, no, it's got something for everybody. Anybody that is technology savvy using an iPhone, no matter what their age, likes the vividness of the screen and loves the intuitive interface. And you can see our biggest age groups are probably 46 and over. And so we really appeal to all different age groups, which we knew from our market research. We could predict this, and it's actually showing up in real life. The other thing we predicted is where our market share would come from. And the number one group that's switching to us is multiple daily injectors, those people who have sat on the sidelines for years because the current pumps were too embarrassing, frustrating, and fearful to use, are coming to us in droves, which means we're expanding the number of people who are going on pump therapy. We're also showing that we can take a product or a market share away from Medtronic Mini-Med, Animas, and the others out there. So over half of our business comes from our competitors. So we're doing the 2 things that we set out to try to do with all of our market research, which was take the targeted customer away and then hopefully make more people able to get onto a pump by eliminating the barriers that we found during market research. So that's about my last slide on my prepared comments. I'll go back one. But again, we position the product as the simplest and most intuitive to use in the marketplace. And again, we're light years ahead of the competition, and there's so much to below that we'll do something like 30 million in revenues this year, and we'll double probably every year in revenues for the next 4 to 5 years at least. And the numbers predict we're going to get somewhere between 50 to 80% of the market share of the industry and expand it. So that's the end of my prepared comments. But again, I'm a firm believer in market research builds great products, and that great products build great companies. And too many people try to do it by the seat of the pants, or they think they're the product guru, and they don't talk to their target customers, and they'll miss a lot. And that'll end up showing up in the lack of adoption of the product that they're developing. And again, I think we've put something like 50 million, that's 50 million, into the development of Insulin. And had we been wrong, that would have been a large investment that would have been written off. So those are my comments, and I open it back up to the moderators so we can do the Q&A portion of this. Are you there?
Yes. Well, thank you so much. That was a very educational and informative presentation, and I'm going to open it up. If you're an online participant, there is a chat box that you can put questions in, and for the participants here, you are free to come to the microphone and ask questions. Okay, we have a gentleman coming to the mic.
Mr. Blickenstaff, thank you very much for your presentation. One of the things you mentioned early on in your presentation about market research was the idea of keeping up with your competitors and being aware of what your competitors are doing. And your closing statement, one of your closing statements was, right now, you consider yourself light years ahead of your competition. What are you continuing to do, even after you've developed this product now, to make sure that you stay ahead of the competition?
Right. So what I didn't talk about is about 4 or 5 other ideas that came out of the market research that would be enhancements to the product and would be alternative features. And so those are actively in development. One of them was something called T-Connect, which is through our USB port, we can upload the data of the pump, which shows all your blood glucose levels, all your dosing levels, and you can see whether you're staying in the control range, you're at the high, you want to be about 125, at the low, about 90 on your BGs. Well, that data goes into a secure cloud, and it can be uploaded by, let's say you're away at college, you can share that with your parents and your caregivers, and they can look over your shoulder. That feature, which we just launched, is very unique. No one else has it. It really starts bringing us into that sort of electronic or mobile health category. And we probably have over half of our customers are now using that, and it helps give them better control. So there's a lot of ideas like that that we're working on. Another one is a dual hormone pump with the JDRF. That's the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, to try to create a closed loop multi-hormone pump. So there's about 6 or 8 ideas in our pipeline that are very far ahead of what the competition is thinking about.
Thank you. Hi, Kim. Tom Shaughnessy at ICC. Excellent presentation. You mentioned you hired a market research expert, and I know you like to surround yourself with great people. How do you find these individuals, and how do you decide which ones to hire to help your company succeed? Thank you.
Yeah, let me just say hiring is about 50-50 maybe, coin flip, in terms of whether you get somebody that's really good or not. We knew the profile of what we wanted. We wanted somebody that had broad healthcare expertise, had taken products through the product life cycle. And we found a fellow who came to us from Bristol Myers, where he did the drug Abilify, among other things. He's a part of the Abilify team that took it from concept through the clinical trials through to the positioning for its use for, I believe it's a bipolar drug. And so Eric just had success written all over him, and then he'd gone on to be securities analyst where he has to pick winners and losers as an analyst. And so his ability to look at a broad different, a broad spectrum of medical devices and actually pick the winners and losers and talk about it in public for primary market research gave me some confidence that he probably had the right skill set. And again, you don't know until you start working with somebody, but he had the skill sets. I mean, he's very decisive, he's very knowledgeable, he trusts his data, he knows how to design these studies to give him the right answer. And when he gets the answers, we know what to do with them. So he's been vital, and he's developed the entire strategy of the company. That's how vital he's been.
Okay, Kim, we have a question from an online participant. Her name is Anne. Says, how can you tell that although product is a good idea, you could produce and market it profitably? And she also has a follow-up. Also, did your market research something about the insurance defray the cost of the customer?
Yeah, look at it. Yeah, very good question, Ann. One of the things you have to do is look at this not only from the customer standpoint, but from the entire sort of profit and loss standpoint. So you can have sales, but can you make it profitably? Is the payer involved? Who is the payer, and will they pay? So the answer is yes, we can make money. We actually have invested in automation, had a very, very tight manufacturing plan. So as we were developing the product, the bill of materials, looking at cycle times to produce, and coming up with the unit cost to project margins. So that was a key part of the business plan, because revenues are one thing, but profits have to ultimately follow in order for it to be a successful business. Now, your comment on insurance is a very good comment. We did a lot of market research with the insurers, and so this is 80 or 90% paid by private insurers, so the Cignas and the Aetnas of the world. Very small percentage of it is the government, CMS, what it's called. So we did payer decision-maker interviews to determine whether they were likely to cover a new infusion pump under their current systems, and or what additional evidence did we have to have in order to have them provide coverage. And so what our research found was if we have FDA approval, they don't deny their participants coverage. And our copay is the same as everybody else's copay. We charge the same. So depending upon your plan, you might have a 10% copay, a 20 or a 30. But they definitely answered positively that they were going to provide coverage without any other additional kinds of published peer review reports and that sort of thing. So we did a very thorough study of that. We also had expert opinion about whether we fit within the current codes that all of the other pumps are reimbursed under. It is a very difficult thing to try to get a product, in a new product and get it covered. And fortunately, in this business plan, there was coverage available when we did our market research also on that payer group. So that was a very good question, Ann.
Could you talk about finding funding in order to begin the market research process?
Well, there was a first round of financing when I joined the company. There was somebody that was going to invest in the technology because they thought a better insulin pump could be developed from that new technology. And that was about the only idea. And so I got recruited in first to be on the board. And then as I started talking, I realized they needed a CEO that knows how to do this kind of stuff. And the product definition hadn't happened yet. The market research hadn't happened. So as a part of the financing, I put together what I expected to accomplish in a year, and I talked about the kind of people I was going to bring on board, because I think we had basically 4 researchers in a very small lab. And so I outlined, that I was going to need, hundreds of thousands of dollars for salaries and for studies and all that sort of thing in order to come up with a very defined product roadmap for the next round of financing. So that was clearly a part of that first round of what we call use of proceeds that we were going to spend money on.
Okay, another question from an online participant. His name is Randy. His question is, which technique of market research that your company used did you find to be the most effective?
Well, I'll tell you, the ones that are the most fun are seeing the videos of those qualitative focus groups. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of great reaction taken. Early on, they came up with the broad ideas that we hadn't thought of, and that may not have come out in the more quantitative market research. What I really like about the quantitative market research is it can then translate that sort of energy and emotion that you feel within that setting into something more clinical and analytical, because what you do in one of the exercises, you give them each of the pumps that would be available, and you start asking them to allocate. If they have $100, how much would they spend on one versus how much on the others, which is sort of an intent to purchase kind of exercise. And then definitely the intent to purchase exercise is also a great one to see, because it really sort of gives you, along with that allocation exercise, a sense of how far ahead are you of your next closest competitor, and then you can get into what some of the features are that stack up as to be the highest. So each one of these is a different utility in the business plan. I think the qualitative ones really guide our product development process and made us make choices. I think the quantitative stuff really appealed to the investors who were looking for quantitative proof, years before we launched, that we were going to have revenues that would make, the investment very attractive. So we'd use different parts for different things. But personally, I love sitting in on focus panels, watching from behind the mirror, and seeing people just, grovel over a concept like using a touch screen or the USB power-up port. And just seeing the emotional reaction that people have. These are good questions, by the way.
Hi, Mr. Blickenstaff. My name is Victoria Hartman, and this is, I think, more of a question from a diabetic standpoint. I feel like a lot of your competitors are doing a lot of things with continuous glucose monitoring. And I was just wondering if that's something that your company would consider in the future, and if so, would you go and integrate with Dexcom like Animas did, or would you create your own like MiniMed did?
Very good question. We do have an announced agreement with Dexcom. Dexcom is just down the street from us, so it's very easy to work for them. In fact, I was the first outside board member on Dexcom's board when it got founded. And I've known those folks for a long time. The Dexcom is the most accurate of the CGMs out there. You seem to be pretty informed. And in fact, there's a new generation that's out, and there's a lot of data coming out, and it is very good. And so we want to be aligned with the best. We also have a touch screen. Nobody else has a touch screen to display their CGM data. You saw the Medtronic pump. Somehow it displays that CGM data on that small little real estate of that LCD screen. So that program is well underway. We'll be submitting to the FDA in the first part of next year, and we hope we have approval to market it by the end of the year. But it's going to be a really, really slick implementation of the display of the CGM data.
Hi, Kim. My name is Jeremiah Brown. I have a question as far as from the point where you have a patent to come out with a new product, and what advice would you give to somebody who's starting out, who's looking to find like capital or venture capitalists, and the steps of from the time when he gets like a provisional patent or a patent, and to getting the research done, and when did you say it had to get at least 50% very likely response back of the research, and then finding the capital to finish doing it all the research? Just do you have any advice towards that?
Yeah, let me just say that the more compact that your target market, the lower the cost to actually get to the market, and the higher the innate demand for the product is, the better chance you're going to have for raising capital. So, we have a market that has, I think there's about 6,000 endocrinologist offices, so that's a very finite group to get to. We were getting intent to purchase scores in the 70s and 80s, which is very high, and it looked like the amount of capital needed to get there when you build a revenue model and you estimate your costs and so forth looked to be very attractive. And in general, they're looking for a 10-to-1 investment ratio, so they're looking for $10 of payoff for every dollar. So if you have a business plan that says, I need $50 million in capital, and I can, I can generate $100 million in revenues, and the public markets will value that at, 400, 500 million. You've got your 10-to-1 ratio, and that's sort of the magic formula in venture capital. And so again, that goes back to, your revenues, that's your intent to purchase scores and your market research, having that P&L where you know that you're going to make profit, going to make money once you get out to some reasonable rate. And then the total potential market. I mean, I didn't mention this, but in the diabetes space, there's about $1.5 billion of pumps sold every year as pumps and supplies. We can double that to get it up to about $3 billion. We think we can take, 40 to 50% of that. So we're talking about $1 billion to $1.5 billion in revenues. So the payoff of $150 million that went into us is going to be a very, very handsome payoff to the venture capitalists.
Well, thank you. As far as with finding the actual investors, is there any recommendations there?
Well, yeah, it's a very small community of venture capitalists, and it's sort of bi-coastal. The big centers are going to be in San Francisco, and then Boston and New York are sort of where you're going to find them. You can basically go to the National Venture Capital Association, the NVA, and see everybody that is on that list, and everybody belongs to that. And then I think there's some rankings out there about who has the most capital, because they look at the amount of money they raised in these funds, and there's a top tier group of about 5 or 6 that I can give you the names of if you want to send me an email. But you can definitely go out and talk to those folks first. And then you get down into the second tier that tend to follow the top tier, and there's a lot more names in that bucket. But it's the NVCA, National Venture Capital Association. Just Google that and start there.
Thank you. Your email is Kim Blickenstaff. What was that? I'm sorry.
It's Blickenstaff, B-L-I-C-K, just like it's spelled here, and it's gmail.com.
Gmail. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, we are right about at 1:30, and we want to thank you, Kim, for your presentation. It was very worthwhile for the students. We want to thank students for coming here today and our online participants as well. And so the students, I know some of them have class, they're free to go. If you do have any questions that you didn't have time to come up to the microphone, Kim has agreed and voluntarily given his time to answer those questions even after 1:30. So, okay, thank you very much, Kim.
All right, thank you. I'm glad it works.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Great,
does anyone have questions here? Okay, I think that they are finished. I don't think there's any more questions.
Okay, thank you so much.